Back in 1919, a single document was signed with this huge, ambitious goal to end all wars forever. But ironically, it became infamous for helping to kick off the deadliest conflict in human history. Yep, today we're unpacking the story of the Treaty of Versailles. So how did it all go so terribly wrong? I mean, that's the million-dollar question, right? It's something that has stumped historians for a century. How did a treaty that was supposed to create a lasting peace end up planting the seeds for a war that would tear the world apart just 20 years later? Okay, so picture this. World War I, after 4 absolutely brutal years, finally ends in 1918. The winners, we're talking Britain, France, and the United States, they all get together in Paris. But here's the thing. They were not on the same page at all. France, for instance, wanted to completely crush Germany, to make sure it could never be a threat again. But then you had America's President Wilson, who was pushing for this really idealistic peace without victory. And Britain, well, they were trying to find some middle ground. The result of all this clashing, it wasn't really a treaty. It felt more like a verdict being handed down. And right at the heart of this whole thing was one single, infamous clause, Article 231, better known as the War Guilt Clause. It basically forced Germany to accept 100% of the blame for starting the war. Now, this wasn't just some sentence on a piece of paper. Oh no, this was the moral justification for every single harsh punishment that was about to come down. And it created this deep, lasting wound of national humiliation for the German people. So what were these punishments exactly? Well, they were so incredibly severe that you can really break them down into 4 key pillars. 4 pillars that basically put the entire nation of Germany in shackles. First up, territory. Germany was forced to give up nearly 20% of its land. And look, this wasn't just empty fields. We're talking about critical, mineral-rich industrial regions, the very engine of its economy. And to add insult to injury, those resources were then handed over to the Allies as part of Germany's payment. And the bleeding didn't stop at its European borders. Not by a long shot. Germany was stripped of all of its overseas colonies. Places like Qingdao in China, New Guinea, its territories in Africa, all gone. Its entire global empire, something they had built over decades, was just dismantled and carved up by the victors. Okay, pillar number 2, the military. The treaty basically dismantled Germany's armed forces. I mean, its army was capped at just 100,000 men. That's a tiny fraction of what it was during the war. And get this, they were forbidden from having an air force, any tanks, or any submarines. The idea was pretty clear. Make sure Germany could never, ever be a military threat again. Third, and this one was a real gut punch, the reparations. Germany was ordered to pay a staggering 132 billion gold marks. Now, let me put that in perspective for you. In today's money, that's roughly 2 trillion US dollars. It was an astronomical, unbelievable sum. And here's the kicker. It was made almost impossible to pay because the very industrial lands they needed to make that money had just been taken away from them. And get this debt cast an unbelievably long shadow. This wasn't some short-term penalty. It took Germany 92 years to pay it all off. The final payment wasn't made until October of 2010. Can you even imagine that? A nation in our lifetime still paying for a war its great-grandparents fought? So there you have it. You take away their land, you gut their military, you saddle them with impossible debt, and you force them to take all the blame. Put it all together, and these 4 pillars, well, they weren't a path to peace. They were a perfect recipe for resentment. Now, it's so important to understand that these weren't just punishments on paper, right? This wasn't just about economics or territory. They inflicted these deep psychological wounds on the German people. And this is where we see a peace treaty turn into a catalyst for the next war. The sheer weight of this treaty created this overwhelming sense of national shame. You have to understand, this feeling of being unfairly punished by the whole world, it wasn't just a political thing. It was personal. It was felt by everyday people, and it got woven into the very fabric of their national identity. And a feeling like that, it doesn't just go away. It festers. This whole environment of bitterness, this deep desire for revenge, it created the perfect fertile ground for extremist ideas and nationalist movements to grow.
So in the end, the treaty didn't really end the conflict. It just hit the pause button and planted the seeds for World War II, which of course broke out just 2 decades later.
But what if there was another way? Did it have to be this way? Because, amidst all the brutal politics, there were these incredible moments right on the battlefield that showed a completely different kind of peace was possible. One based not on punishment, but on shared humanity. Let's go back for a second. Back to Christmas, 1914. You're in the muddy, miserable trenches of the Western Front. German and British soldiers, who had orders to kill each other on sight, did something absolutely remarkable. Spontaneously, they just stopped fighting. I mean, soldiers cautiously climbed out of their frozen trenches and met right in the middle in what they called no man's land. They actually shook hands. They exchanged little gifts, cigarettes for some chocolate. They talked about their families back home. And famously, in a few spots along the front, they even kicked a football around. For just one day, they weren't enemies. They were just people. And when you think about it, this shows such a stunning contrast, doesn't it? Out there on the front lines, the soldiers themselves found common ground. They proved that reconciliation was possible, even in the absolute worst of times. But back in the fancy halls of power, the politicians were busy creating a peace that was based only on punishment, blame, and resentment. And all of this really leaves us with a pretty powerful question, doesn't it? The Treaty of Versailles was a peace built on punishment, and it failed spectacularly. The Christmas truce, on the other hand, was a moment of peace built on shared humanity, even if it only lasted for a day. So what does this whole story teach us about what it really takes to make peace? Is it about victory and vengeance, or is it found in understanding and reconciliation?